Okay, good morning. We're doing Hilchos Shechita. We are starting today Siman Kaf. Now we just finished brachos. I just want to mention the obvious bracha that was not mentioned. Right? We said it al hashchita. What about Shehechiyanu? You say Shehechiyanu. So we know it's common. There's many mitzvos we say if it's mizman lezman, first time in your lifetime, especially that you have some simcha involved. There's a bracha of Shehechiyanu also on mitzvot. So this sugya really comes up later on by Kisui Dam, because there is no Shehechiyanu on Shechita. Everyone agrees. No one says Shehechiyanu on Shechita. It's a machlokas by Kisui Dam. Sfardim do not, Ashkenazim do, for the first time in their lifetime only, for Kisui Dam. But Shechita, no one says Shehechiyanu. Again, for every mitzvah, the question is always going to be better than the answer, perhaps, depending on the mitzvah, because some mitzvahs get, some don't. Primarily, it boils down to minhag, but two main reasons given for not getting Shehechiyanu on Shechita is the Ramah says because you are mazik the animal, and therefore you don't. Others don't like this. We say it by Mila, in Eretz Yisrael, Ashkenazim, Sfardim all over. But the Shach has another answer. He says because you only say Shehechiyanu on a mitzvah that you're chayav to do. When you get kisui dam in front of you, now there's a chiyuv for you to cover it. Again, it's questioned by all mitzvahs. Okay, we're not going to get into every different mitzvah, but so he says shechita is optional, and therefore, if you don't want to eat meat, you don't have to shecht, and so therefore, Shehechiyanu is only when there's a mitzvah chiyuv. So at least that's how he fits in with most mitzvahs. At least, okay.
Shoes because the leather shoes
So shechit. Now, one other interesting thing by nails. We mentioned earlier about checking a knife, so we do it with the nails. So I asked Rabben David, and he says, a shochet who bites his nails and has no nails left cannot check a knife. So, anyway, let's start with today. Now, I sent out some pictures. We'll try and look at some pictures. Understanding the anatomy will help to understand the exact anatomy that we're going to be reading. If you see it, it helps. And obviously, if you're going to watch a live shechita, it'll help so much. Because like we learned before, anything a person can testify, I know that I didn't do this or I didn't do that, but if you didn't know what you were looking for at the time of the shechita, and you just say, oh, after the fact, oh yeah, I'm sure I didn't touch this or touch that, we learned earlier and we'll see again, you have no ne'amanas. Because if a person doesn't know what to watch out for, he's not going to be able to watch out. So Siman Chaf, Aleph, Seif Aleph. Makom hashchita batzavar. Where on the neck do you shecht? The place is, so Bakana, when we're talking about the windpipe, the trachea, Letzad harosh, towards the head, we might call it higher up, but anyways, it's towards the head. So it's mishipui kova ulamata. It's from we're going to show you this, it's the slope of the kova and below it. Really it means below the slope. Not the slope, but it means below the slope. Again, if you look in the Gemara and we're showing him, it's a little bit it is a discussion, but it means below, the end of the day. V'hu kodem sheyatchil hakova l'shapeya. And as he clearly writes, it's before the slope, okay? Further down the neck, closer to the lung. It's below the slope, where it starts l'shapeya v'la'alot, where it's before it starts to slope and go up to the head. V'hainu shir bechite. And you have to leave, now, I'll just say over it, the kova is the thyroid cartilage. Here, I'll just put you can study the pictures later, but here's a picture you can blow up or look it up later. This is from Chulin Illuminated. It's a great book. Here, I'll explain it and you can look at it later, but these are just a couple pictures to zoom in on later on. So basically, the kova itself, when you look at the pictures, you'll understand even better, obviously. The kova itself is the thyroid cartilage. Then below that right? Away from when I say below, I'm saying away from the neck, closer to the lungs, closer to the legs. That's below. So you first get the thyroid cartilage, and then afterwards you get the cricoid cartilage, and that's in Hebrew Taba'at HaGadola, we're about to read. And then you have the other Share Tabaos, the whole long windpipe. The windpipe is made up of many, many rings of cartilage, and on the top it's a thin membrane called Ritzuot Habasar. So there's the circles of the trachea are not complete. On the very top, they don't. It's not a complete circle. It's a thin membrane on top, and you can see those in the pictures. Except the one exception is the Tabat HaGadola. The Tabat HaGadola, the cricoid cartilage, that's a complete solid ring.
And
Cartilage all
the
around.
vocal cords are below that.
So the chitim that we just mentioned the words in Chazal, what they call the chitim because it sticks out a little bit, the grains, those are the vocal cords. Okay, the vocal cords are in the thyroid cartilage, lower down from the Shipui Akova. The thyroid cartilage has a little bit where it's doesn't begin to slope yet. That's generally where you're going to see the vocal cords, and they're a little bit at an angle. It's not 100% ideal, but for visually in your head, but that's where it is. And then the Shipui Akova is above, generally speaking. Again, of course, you can have slight variations in animals. On the Shipui Akova is where you don't have the, it's no longer the vocal cords. Okay, so let's read over here. So Bechite, you have to leave some of the vocal cords. As long as you shecht, and you leave the vocal cords where you shecht, and it's below there, you're going to be okay. V'hu shebesofa kana lamala, which is the upper end of the kosher part of the kana for shechita. Yesh betoch tabat hagadola. At the above the windpipe, right, the very top of the windpipe, you get the tabat hagadola, the cricoid, and then you get the kova. And the majority of the kova has the shipui kova with it. And kamo shnei gargarim miguf shachuse perush targum, I don't know, badal ozen, sechusa od odin, klomar hakasha sheba ozen. Okay. Anyways, v'nikraim chite, and these are called the chitim, the vocal cords. V'im shachat betoch hachitim v'shir mehem kol shehu lamala kshera. Now we don't paskin like this way. We'll see in a moment. But as long as you leave the vocal cords, you're cutting within the vocal cords or below, all the way down the neck. We'll see the bottom limit. Then it's going to be kshera. Sheharei shachat mishipui akova lamata, because you ended up shechting below the shipui akova. The shipui akova is psula, but in the bottom part of the kova, it's still kosher as long as you leave the chitim. V'im lo shir mehem klum, you didn't leave any of the vocal cords. In other words, you shechted above the vocal cords. So then, im lo shir mehem klum ela shachat lamala mehem hareze mugremet. It has the din of mugremet. Mugremet perush hagrama achra'at esakin chutz lamako mashchita. Hagrama means you did this. We'll get to these 5 things later on, shortly actually. Hagrama is when you do it out of the kosher place in the neck. So then, if you do it too high, that's called a shchita mugremet, and therefore it turns it into a nevela, or psula, and it's pasa. Okay, lechatchila yishchot lamata mitabat hagadola. Now, lechatchila, you always aim for the middle of the neck, in the middle of the windpipe, below the tabat hagadola, below the cricoid cartilage. Okay. Okay. Ben David said, "Umaisa, if it's you shecht, nowadays you must shecht lower down, below, right, towards the lungs, below the vocal cords. If you're touching anywhere, even within the vocal cords, against the Shulchan Aruch, we paskin it's a nevela, and it wouldn't even be kosher for Rabbanut. I don't mean to insult Rabbanut, but it wouldn't be even kosher for Rabbanut. It would be considered a nevela l'kuli alma. And Yeah, or a suffix nevela, really. Because, because it's very hard to know exactly. And then you have the whole issues of ba'alachson, and it becomes unclear exactly if it's in the right place. So therefore, it's just, now there are some, if you look in the, I don't know if there's different opinions, that's what Rabbi David told me. If you look in the Nosei Kelim, so many of the poskim, b'shat atchak, b'hefser meruba, then they might allow it. And again, it also depends, on the situation, where in the chitim, v'chule. Okay. Ulechatchila yishchot lamata mitabat hagadola. We said v'shi'uro lamata ad rosh knaf ha'una kishenofchinota. Now, what's the lower limit? Down the neck. So it's, if you were to blow up the lungs, right? If you ever take an animal and once you shecht it, take it apart, you can put your mouth, I'm not so sure if it's healthy, I've done it. You can put your mouth on the windpipe and you can blow up the lungs. So when you blow up the lungs, you see how high the wings or the lobes of the lungs go upward. And that's as high as they go, that's where on the trachea, you can mark it with a pen or a marker, whatever you look. And you see if the cut is below, right, closer to the rest of the body and the lungs, then that would be a nevela. It'd be hagrama. It'd be out of the makom mashchita. The makom mashchita, we said, basically is from the tabat hagadola all the way down to where the windpipe, but it must stay above the upper lobe when you blow it up. The discussion if it's the left or the right, Lamaisa doesn't really matter. It's wherever it blows up the highest. And it also depends if it's alive or dead, some say. It might change if it's right or left. Anyway, that's another discussion.
This is a situation even where you cut below the tabat and the.
Well, there's the highest and the lowest. So the lungs is the lowest. The tabat, the cartilage, is the highest.
Cut below that,
then it's out of the neck. So everyone knows giraffes. There's really no question. The question is how much do you care about Masora? But as far as knowing where to shecht it based on the anatomy, you're going to have no less of a question. The easiest time finding the neck for a giraffe. Okay.
maybe debunking the rumor that we don't eat giraffes because we don't know where to shack that.
Basically.
Right, okay.
Right. We do know where to shack the giraffe. It's just that we don't have some don't have a Masara, or some, I don't know. Everyone has their own opinion on that one, so I'm not going to get into it. Okay.
If you put it so low that when you blow up the lung rise above the.
You're right. When you blow it up, it blows higher up on the windpipe. In other words, the very bottom of the windpipe that attaches to the lung is too low. That would make it a nevela. Not a suffix nevela, but a nevela. Okay. When you blow it up, the lobes, they go a little bit higher. Ad makom shemagia rosha bakane. So where the upper limit, where the lobes blow up to, up along the trachea. Az hu makom be'atzma shchitat nogad keshahaita chaya habehema. So we're assuming that's where the upper lobe got to while it was alive. And that's where the makom mashchita begins, or ends, depending, right, where you're coming from. V'haita roe kedarka, and it's based on how it's roe kedarka, how it normally walks around or extends its neck normally. Kedarka, keshetimshach tzavara lirot, right, how it bends its neck or extends. Bli shete'anos atzma limshach tzavara beyoter. But you don't overextend its neck more than it normally did when it was alive. All right? You don't take the kana when you're measuring and pull too hard. Right? You have these with pipes all the time. They expand and whatever in life. There's a lot of things that the more you pull on it, but then as soon as you let go, then it relaxes, it goes back. So you go by, you just extend it normally. We assume how it was when it was alive without over pulling out the trachea from the lung when you do this test. Haga. Ube'of lamata bekana kamo beveshet. And then when it comes to a oaf, basically the landmark for a chicken is the zevek, the crop. You look at the veshet, we're going to get to it. The lower limit of a veshet for a chicken is the zevek, the crop, and that's the same for the kana. Okay. Okay, let's go on. Bet. Ubeveshet matchelet hamakom keshechotchin oto mitkavetz. Now, with a veshet, the esophagus, this is more of a membrane material, and just so you can visualize it, when a person shechs into the neck, first it comes up to, the first thing you're gonna reach after you get through the skin is you're gonna get to the windpipe, the trachea. That's generally the way it is for animals and for chickens. You're going to get to the windpipe first, and then as you go more dorsal, more to the higher up to the back of the neck, you're going to get to the esophagus. Okay, by pigeons, they're on the side. One's on one side, one's on the other side. But that's generally how it works. So now, the siman for the esophagus, now, when you get to the esophagus, so the lower limit either is going to get to the crop in the chicken or the stomach of the animal. When it gets to the upper limit, it's called we're going to see the word in a second, turbatz haveshet. And that is basically from the neck, connecting from the neck to the oral cavity and the esophagus that we're used to, that very, very, very flimsy, and it kind of like collapses on itself, right? It's like a little bit like a balloon, sort of. So it collapses on itself. So in between, there's what we call a turbatz haveshet, and it's a thin muscle. And if you cut through the very beginning where it touches the esophagus and you slice it, it doesn't expand and it doesn't wrinkle. What's the right word? Shrink. Okay? It doesn't wrinkle and shrinkle, whatever. Contract. Retract? Well, I'm not sure. Okay, whichever one it is. It's not a muscle anyway, so usually that's for muscles. Anyways, but whatever it is, if it's going to shrink and wrinkle up on you, then, or shrivel up, whatever, so then that's where it's kosher. Okay? That's the normal esophagus. When you get to the muscle part, the turbatz haveshet, so the very beginning, it'll just stay exactly where it was. That's, we're going to see, it's puzzle. If it's a little bit higher up, it actually opens up on you. It expands, per se, and it opens up. And perhaps that's because, it was explained and illuminated, maybe it was by Rabelsky, but whoever, that it could be that normally it's a little bit taut, the muscle. And when it dies, then it, contracts, or the opposite. So then it loosens up a little bit, and then that's what causes it to open up. Okay, whatever the reason is, that's the metzias. If I don't have it, maybe not. Okay, remind me to send one if you want. Okay, so let's just read it inside. So beveshet matchelet hamakom keshechutchin oto mitkavetz. It has to shrink up and shrivel up on you, and then you know it's kosher. Ad makom shiyasir, until it starts to get hairy. When it reaches the stomach, then there's, I guess, maybe some cilia or hair or some kind of something there. V'yadchil yot pratzim kekeres. And so it has these so-called hairs that are part of the stomach. Okay? And so if you cut into those hairs, then that's pasul, psula, or nevela. Shachat lamala mimakom zeh. If you cut above this is near the head. If you go above the esophagus, hu anikra turbatz haveshet, perush chatzar haveshet. It's like a chatzar, courtyard of the veshet. Olamata mimakom zeh, or too low, as it starts to get into or enters the area right near the stomach, and that's already the innards. And so therefore, shchitato psula. V'shiur turbat saveshet, she'en ra'oi l'shchita, lamala v'behema v'chaya, kadei she'yochaz b'shtei etzbe'otav. Now, when the animal is alive, right, and you didn't cut through it yet, so the proper, many explain it's really supposed to be the exact same landmarks, okay, exactly how it works out, it's a question mark, but in order to know how to do it for a cow, you take two regular fingers, and for starting from like the top of the neck, where the jawbone is, and then you go down two fingers, and then you know you're going to be below the tabat hagadola, and that's not a problem. Let's keep reading. V'yeshomim kadei rochav arba etzbaot, and the Ramah says, no, it's a whole machloket how to understand the Gemara. The Gemara doesn't give exactly a number of fingers. So the Ramah says, no, we go by 4 fingers. The Kabbalah biyad kadmonim shekol behema v'chaya hashir ad makom shemageh sham ozen habehema v'chaya keshekol fefinoto. And he says that we have a tradition, and so if you have that tradition, you can use it. You go by the ears, and when they go down, when you bend it over, so then you'll see where it goes, how far it reaches down on the neck. Out below that is where you can shecht. So now that you have the landmarks for an animal, you visualize and imagine basically the same for an oaf, but it's proportional. It's obviously going to be much less than 2 fingers or 4 fingers, because a chicken's much smaller than an animal. Hagav ein chiluk bein yona l'shari ofos bekulan shiurin shaveh. Now it doesn't matter what kind of animal, what kind of chaya, what kind of oaf, these shiurim are all the same for all of them. Ulamata ada zefek. And the bottom limit for an esophagus for a chicken is the zevek. Okay, for an animal we said it's when it starts to get little hairs, and here it's for the crop. Haga, v'of she'en lo zefek ad bein hagapayim. And if you don't have a crop, then you go by the wings. Okay, once the wings begin, then that's when it's too low. And it's an avela. Since we don't really all know, all these landmarks exactly, so then just aim for the middle of the neck, and everything's going to always be fine. Did I skip? No. Gimel. I did skip. Gimel. Tzarich hashochet sheyishchot be'emtza hasavar v'im shachat min tzdadim shchitato kshera. So you have to aim for what we call the bottom of the neck. Obviously, if you flip an animal upside down, obviously change. But basically, if it's standing, it would be from the bottom. Okay. So then, and even if you start shechting from the sides of the animal, it's kosher. But if you're going to be starting from the side, it must be that you know what you're doing. It has to be that you make sure you know where the simanim are, you move them over, and you make sure you cut the simanim before the neck, or the neck bone, the spine. Okay, the vertebrae. Ki simanim rakim, because the simanim are very soft, in general, right, compared to bone at least. V'nidchi min hasakin, and they move away from the knife, especially the esophagus. V'hu adin l'shochet min ha'oref. And so too, if you shecht from the back of the neck, and then as you're cutting, you're sliding around to cut the simanim, and you can move the simanim a little bit to the side, so then that's going to be okay. Now we're going to see, for us, we're a super machmer, no shia, we don't cut the neck bone, but anyway, when we're doing shchita, but anyways, yeah, mina oref is the back of the neck. Yeah, you don't touch the bone, you start at the end. Yeah, but you're turning your knife. Like, you're not just going straight down, you're doing a little bit of backwards and forwards, and then as you're cutting, you're sliding your knife all the way around without doing any shia, which creates if you're super machmer, which we are by Shia, it does create issues. Anyways, no one checks like that. Or if it's good for Malika, but it's not what we really. It's not really what we want to do for shechita. Fine, we'll stop.